On to the last interview, and it's with Ross Garrod, best known as the founder and CEO of PracticePal. But today, he's talking about music and the brain, specifically the missing myelination link. Ross, Happy New Year, and welcome back to Teaching Notes.
Happy New Year. Thank you for having me back.
Now, just remind listeners who you are, please, and where you fit into the whole kind of music education world.
I'm a musician. My undergrad was up at the RNCM in Manchester. And then I did my postgrad at the Royal Academy of Music, and then did the usual mix for a performing musician of playing orchestral and other kind of freelance work plus teaching. And then I got more and more into teaching and went on from there to start PracticePal, which is a music education focused platform.
Great. Now, you're not here today to talk about PracticePal. You are here to talk about the missing myelination link. So, a few questions. Number one, what is myelination? Number two, what is a myelination link? And number three, why is it missing?
Good questions. I like it. I mean, yes, this is my kind of stump box speech. So this is my chance to kind of rant about why music education is absolutely crucial, not just for the kind of creative aspects, but also for our development as people, as humans. So myelination, you kind of have to jump into the science lab here. So you've got to picture your brain as two halves with this junction box in the middle, which is the corpus callosum. Now, the corpus callosum is made up of millions of nerve connections which pass electrical signals. Now, we, by default, only have a couple of good pathways for passing electrical signals across the brain, which are kind of the ones that we develop through physical movements, so learning to walk, things like that, but also through language skills, so learning to talk and to understand and comprehend. Now, the reason that those become kind of strong and structured is because of this process of myelination. So as you repeat and rehearse a new skill, what that does in your brain is it triggers these things. I wish I could remember that. It's something like oligodendrocytes. I can't quite remember what it is. But anyway, they're the little things inside your brain which deposit a fatty substance on these nerve connections called myelin. Now, that process can happen loads and loads of times. So you can end up with something that's, I don't know, got maybe 15 of these layers of myelin, making it really substantial, a meaty core. Now, the effect of that is basically, it's the same as your internet connection, okay? So if you think about the difference between dial-up internet, which I grew up with, and I'm sure you grew up with, I'm afraid, and super fast broadband fiber, that's kind of what we're talking about here, because on their own, your nerve connections in the corpus callosum, they're actually really bad at conducting electricity. So in terms of getting signals and information, data across the brain, they're really bad. That's why it's so hard to do something new, because your brain kind of goes like, oh no, I can't, where's the place to put that electrical signal? I'll try and send it down here, but that takes ages and I can't get there by the time I need it. Anyway, so what we default to doing is sending data down those super fast connections in our brain. So that's myelination for you. Then what's the myelination link? Now, that's a kind of slightly shorter question to answer, because the point is we're trying to get you thinking about the missing link. So when we say the missing myelination link, we're trying to get you thinking, okay, this is a gap that we're kind of trying to solve in various other ways. So there's all these theories about education and what we should be doing in education. What is the best stuff? The point being that there's lots of theories where we're trying to say, like, how do we plug this gap in education that holds people back, in particular for those who don't kind of achieve their full potential, which we know is particularly linked to advantage and disadvantage for students. And so what's the missing link? Well, the missing link is the missing myelination link, and it's understanding the purpose of education. So is the purpose of education to fill the brain with data, so knowledge, or is the purpose of education to make the brain better at handling, processing, using, and applying knowledge? Which would be where I'm coming from, where you're saying, actually, we're going to train the brain. We're going to make the brain physically different and stronger so that it is able to achieve more. And so that's why this is a missing link and why that's a missing myelination link. That's the thing that holds this all together.
So I'm guessing that music, therefore, is your solution to this.
Yes, but it's not binary. And this is one of the things that's kind of frustrated me about the general debate around music education. Also, a lot of the research which has gone into this is to treat music as a binary state. So you either are someone who is involved in music or you're someone who isn't involved in music. But there's a whole broad spectrum or scale of like what your involvement is. So you don't switch on a switch by having music lessons, like making that part of a curriculum up to key stage, whatever it is. And so what I'm, if you like, campaigning for or shouting for as loudly as I can is to acknowledge the real truth behind all of this. And actually, even for music educators, this isn't necessarily the most palatable truth, because the thing that really changes a child's cognitive ability is instrumental music practice. So that's the thing that can really stimulate myelination far and above and beyond other subjects studied in school and far above and beyond academic music lessons.
And that's because they're doing the same process again and again and kind of developing it and strengthening those connections in the brain. That's what we're saying.
Yes and more. So yes and no in some ways, because that's not the full picture. So the reason why instrumental music learning or playing practice has such an impact is because not only are you repeating, rehearsing, etc., you're also simultaneously engaging many, many, many more parts of the brain than you do with any other subject. So imagine for a moment, I'm not a violinist, my wife is, and I'm not sure what she'd think of my description right now, but I think it's probably helpful. So imagine I've got a violin, I'm playing a piece of music, I'm learning a piece of music on violin. Okay, now at this moment in time, I'm engaging, let's think about it. So I'm looking at sheet music, so I'm using my visual processing, I'm reading a foreign language, which is music notation. I'm interpreting that into a combination of gross motor skills and fine motor skills, two different parts of the brain. And they are controlling things like my bow action and the fingers on the strings. At the same time, I am orally processing the sound that I'm making and trying to analyze the timbre, the volume, the articulation, all of those kind of things, and then adjust my fine and gross motor skills accordingly. But at the same time, I'm engaging things like my emotional part of my brain, also the kind of mathematical, numerical, the counting part of my brain. I might be counting to try and stay in time. You know, even in the act of something as basic as like playing something from a piece of sheet music, you're blowing everything else that you can do out of the water in terms of engaging different parts of the brain. You know, the only thing that comes close to this for myelination in the brain is learning another language and learning it kind of bilingually. But even that, it doesn't really kind of scratch the surface of the ability of learning a musical instrument to stimulate myelination in the brain and increase IQ.
And with the practicing, if you're sitting in an orchestra or a choir or any kind of band or group, you're also listening to other people, instantly reacting to them. Where do I fit in? Am I getting out of time? Am I perfectly in tune? For me, the answer is no. And so on and so on. You know.
Exactly. Yeah, it's all of that that's going on. And I mean, we're focusing here on myelination because this is the thing that I think is really not talked about and not understood. It just doesn't factor into, as far as I can see, school strategies or government policy around what we're trying to do in education. Are we trying to improve the brain? Are we trying to tackle that gap in advantage with the right kind of support? Because pumping them with extra kind of maths tuition isn't going to do anything. It might make them marginally better at maths if you're lucky, but it's not going to change their cognitive ability for life. What you really want to be saying is follow the science, because if you do, what we could potentially be looking at doing is tackling that attainment gap, is training our students for the future, for all of these things, which I know that companies are crying out for, saying, look, increasingly we're getting new starters. We're kind of having to teach them from scratch about how to problem solve, how to analyze, how to apply knowledge, rather than how to regurgitate or follow instructions.
It sounds like we're heading towards the topic of, if you study music, you'll be better at all your other subjects, which of course then leads on to the whole music shouldn't have to justify its place in the curriculum because it will help other, in inverted commas, core subjects, more serious subjects. So that's why you should do music. I'm sure we'd all agree we should do music because it's such an incredible discipline and it's such an incredible subject. And as you say, it deals with physicality and brain processing and emotion and the human condition and all those things.
Yes and no. So I'm probably not going to give the answer that all heads of musics want me to give here, because the reality is that is, again, to misapply what it is that we're talking about. Because yes, music should be in the curriculum for music's sake. I'll agree with that. But instrumental music should be in the curriculum for the sake of children's brains, because why do you want to leave them with a dial-up internet connection in their brain when you could be installing superfast broadband? So I'm slightly nervous about whether I'll make myself unpopular. I'd like to make it very clear right now that my preference would be both and, so academic music lessons and instrumental music lessons. But the reality is, which one should be the core curriculum subject? It should be the instrumental music, because that's the one that not only is going to give you all the experiential and creative benefits of music, but is also going to have the big impact on your cognitive development.
I'm sure we'd all love to see that. Realistically, can we foresee a situation where all the money is pumped into teacher recruitment to do all this extra teaching for new instruments? Which subjects are going to give way so we can have more music? I mean, I'm with you, but I think it's a mountain to climb.
It is, but a lot of it is like a fake mountain. It's a mountain of misunderstanding rather than of clarity. I think of my children when they get scared of things. It's generally because they don't understand what it would take to get there, rather than because they actually find the thing itself too big or too scary. Now, the same is true really in music education. So we've got some things which are kind of showing that people are starting to understand or want to see this. So one of the real difficulties, and again, I'm not sure whether this will be what people want me to say or not, but is that actually schools have the money to do this if they want to. I could point you to state schools who are doing this. A lot of it is a decision about where you put your money. One of the difficulties in the conversation around schools and money is just the kind of simplistic, we just don't have enough money for these things argument isn't actually true. So part of the question is, what are you choosing to invest your money in? And where are you willing to compromise? So generally the case is you're willing to compromise on music, but you're not willing to compromise on other things.
I don't work in the finance office in the school, but obviously I'm a teacher in the school, involved with schools and so on. And there is a shortage of money, especially at the moment with the energy bills having risen so sharply and pay rises. There's no extra money for that. I can't think of many state schools that I've ever come across where there is loads of money being wasted, shall we say, that could be spent on providing instrumental lessons free. You'll never find me arguing against more music tuition, more instrumental and vocal tuition ever. There are practicalities. You take this to a head, they're going to say, well, where are these lessons going to happen? What's going to have to give way to fund them? We've got to be realistic. If we go to SLT and say, we've got this great idea, I've heard this guy Ross talking on this podcast, wouldn't it be great if? And they're going to come back and say, really, at the moment?
So that's why, for me, the starting point is understanding and data. So it's a re-education of the education system. One of the things that I have seen is the difference in the way, if you like, we at Practice Pal have developed our product and our company and the way that education develops. So we develop incrementally and very rapidly. So iteration, product releases multiple times a week, gathering the data, reviewing what has happened, what works, what doesn't work, and changing. Now, in education, because of the nature of how it's functioning, those changes happen infrequently and they tend to be large. So you'll make a big change, and really you kind of got to go with that change for about 3 to 5 years before you can realistically change again. I'd love to see senior leadership teams thinking about, okay, how is it that we could incrementally move towards this? But at the same time, how are we gathering the data to understand whether this is important? And that's kind of part of what interests me, especially at the moment. So, for example, one of the things we're working on is an insights dashboard for SLT and for school networks. So what that means is we can start to bring together the data around music education and progression. So if you like to start to put people on the scale of how much music have you done? So we talked about music often being treated as binary. You either do it or you don't. And what I want to see is that talked as a scale, like you've either done like a lot or this much or loads or nothing at all. And so putting that on a scale and being able to reference how that has an impact in other subjects. So gathering the data on attainment in other subjects in different year groups, correlating those two, helping you see how the music education stimulates the growth in other areas. Now, with that kind of undeniable, unquestionable data, that's the point at which a senior leader has the confidence that they need to say, okay, this is going to be really painful and this is going to be tough, but we should think about what is it we need to do infrastructure-wise in order to accommodate more music lessons? What is it we need to do timetable-wise to enable this? What is it we need to reprioritize in our spending in order to make this happen?
Maybe this is the start of a revolution, Ross. You never know.
Well, that's definitely the idea. I'm going to keep shouting about it, but it's something that it would be amazing to see, wouldn't it?
It would indeed. And Ross, just tell us where we can find out more about Practice Pal.
Go to practicepalmusic.com and just get in touch through any of the contact buttons or email addresses you find on there, and we can easily send you information. If you're particularly interested in what I've been talking about in terms of myelination, you want to pass that on to your SLT, or you want to kind of circulate that in your music staff for their interest, then if you Google "If We Let Music Sing, Other Subjects Will Soar," there's a blog I've written which is up on our website, or go to the blog section on our website and you'll find it.
Ross, thank you very much.
Thank you.